Imagine this. The United States government, the most powerful economic engine on the planet, completely runs out of money. Not a metaphor, not a slight deficit. The treasury vaults are literally empty. The nation is weeks away from a catastrophic default. The President of the United States is paralyzed. Congress refuses to act, and foreign powers are circling like vultures, ready to dump U.S. bonds and trigger a total financial collapse. What do you think happens next? Does the military step in? Does the government seize assets? No. One man, smoking a cigar, casually walks into the White House and solves the entire crisis with a single phone call. Have you ever wondered who really controls the money in your pocket right now? Is it the government? Is it the president? Let me tell you a secret. The system that controls your wealth, your mortgage, and your future wasn't built by politicians. It was built by the man who walked into that White House. His name was John Pierpont Morgan. And trust me, he didn't save America out of the goodness of his heart. He saved it because he owned way too much of it to let it burn. By 1912, J.P. Morgan didn't just have wealth, he was the wealth. He controlled an estimated 25% of all wealth in the United States. I want you to really process that. Not 25% of the banking sector, 25% of everything. The railroads you rode, the steel mills that built the cities, the shipping lines, the insurance companies, the industrial corporations. A congressional investigation literally found that Morgan and his inner circle held 341 directorships across 112 megacorporations. We are talking about combined assets of $22.2 billion back then. That is roughly $670 billion today. But even that number is a joke because Morgan's true power wasn't what he technically owned. It was his terrifying influence. When Morgan spoke, the global markets moved. When Morgan invested, the entire world followed. When Morgan refused you credit, your company died overnight. And here is the most chilling part of this story. The empire he built, the crisis management playbook he perfected, the very concept of the Federal Reserve that he secretly designed. None of that died with him in 1913. It evolved. It spread like a virus into the DNA of global finance. And it completely controls your life right now today in 2026. The mortgage you struggle to pay every month, it goes through a system Morgan architected. The massive financial bailouts of 2008 and 2020, they followed Morgan's exact 1907 playbook step by step. Those banks that are suddenly deemed too big to fail, they are the direct, bloodline descendants of Morgan's original empire. J.P. Morgan didn't just build a bank. He built the ultimate matrix of crisis capitalism, a flawless model where banks become so massive, so heavily interconnected, that the government literally has a gun to its head. They have no choice but to save the banks. It's a world where private bankers sit in dark rooms and dictate terms to the officials you voted for. You cannot escape this system, because the system isn't a man anymore. It is a method. It is the absolute concentration of financial power. It is using national tragedy as a business opportunity. Let me take you behind the curtain and show you exactly how he pulled off the greatest financial heist in human history, how he birthed the Federal Reserve in a secret island meeting, and why, more than a century after he took his last breath, you are still living in J.P. Morgan's world. Let's rewind. Born in 1837, Morgan wasn't some rags-to-riches underdog. His father, Junius, was already a heavyweight banker in London. Morgan inherited the keys to the kingdom, but what he did with those keys was pure, unadulterated genius. By his 30s, partnering with Anthony Drexel, he realized something profound. Real power isn't lending money to businesses. Real power is restructuring them, crushing their autonomy, and owning their soul. He started with the railroads. In the late 1800s, American railroads were a chaotic bloodbath of price wars and bankruptcies. Everyone else was terrified to invest, but Morgan saw the matrix. He knew that whoever controlled the veins of the country, the tracks moving coal, steel, and people, controlled the heart of the economy. When a railroad went bankrupt, Morgan swooped in as the savior. But his money came with a lethal catch. He fired the board. He put his own men in charge. He dictated the routes. He orchestrated aggressive mergers to annihilate competition, creating massive regional monopolies. They called this brutal tactic Morganization. By the 1900s, he controlled 50% of all U.S. railroad mileage. 50%. That isn't a business. That is a dictatorship of transportation. Then he went after the steel. He financed Andrew Carnegie, and in 1901 orchestrated the largest business deal in the history of the world up to that moment. He bought Carnegie Steel for $480 million, merged it with others, and birthed U.S. Steel, the first billion-dollar corporation on Earth. U.S. Steel controlled 67% of all American steel production. Think about this vertical integration. He controlled the steel. He controlled the trains moving the steel. He controlled the banks financing both. Even John D. Rockefeller felt a chill down his spine looking at Morgan's empire. But Morgan's true masterpiece wasn't building monopolies. It was weaponizing panic. Let's look at the panic of 1907. Do you remember the feeling during the 2008 crash, that sudden, paralyzing fear that the ATMs might just stop working? In 1907, that fear was real. The economy was booming but incredibly fragile. A massive copper speculation scheme collapsed. The Knickerbocker Trust Company, a giant in New York, went insolvent. Total panic erupted. People flooded the streets screaming, demanding their cash. But banks don't keep all your cash in the vault. The system froze. The stock market was in freefall, and the U.S. government had zero power to stop it. There was no central bank. There was only an old man playing solitaire in his private library. On October 24, 1907, Morgan locked the presidents of New York's largest banks inside his library. He sat there, smoking his cigar, examining their balance sheets like a king deciding who would be executed and who would be spared. He personally decided which banks lived and which died. He forced the healthy banks to cough up millions. He strong-armed Rockefeller into depositing massive sums. He made it violently clear, cooperate with me, or you will never do business in this town again. For 2 weeks, an unelected 70-year-old private citizen acted as the central bank of the United States. He saved the country. But here is the catch. While the dust settled and everyone praised him as a hero, look at what actually happened. His banks absorbed all their dead competitors. His company, U.S. Steel, swallowed up the Tennessee Coal and Iron Company at a ridiculously cheap fire sale price. Weaker banks were wiped off the map. Morgan's power was now absolute. Politicians woke up in a cold sweat. They realized that the entire survival of the American Republic relied on the mood of one private banker. The public was furious. Congress demanded a central bank to prevent this from ever happening again. But this is where Morgan pulled off his greatest magic trick. The central bank they created, the Federal Reserve, was secretly designed by Morgan's own men. In November 1910, 6 incredibly powerful men boarded a private train under the cover of darkness to Jekyll Island, Georgia. They used fake names. They hid from the press. Over 10 days, this cartel of private bankers drafted the blueprint for the Federal Reserve. Senator Nelson Aldrich, Morgan's allies, Rockefeller's people, they weren't government officials protecting you. They were bankers designing the very cage that was supposed to hold them. When the Federal Reserve Act passed in 1913, it was sold as a government protector. In reality, it was a private banking cartel, owned by the member banks, with Morgan's empire holding the largest shares. They created a permanent machine to print money and bail themselves out whenever they gambled and lost. Regulatory capture in its purest, most terrifying form. How many of you felt the sting of inflation this past year? Drop a comment below if you've noticed your grocery bill doubling while your paycheck stays the same. That inflation is the hidden tax of this exact system. The Fed prints money bailing out the system while the purchasing power of your savings evaporates. You lose. The banks who borrow cheap and lend high win. Profits are heavily privatized, but the massive losses, those are socialized. You pay for their mistakes. Fast forward to the 2008 financial crisis, or the COVID crash of 2020. What happened? The government used the exact 1907 Morgan playbook. The biggest banks, J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup, were declared too big to fail. They got trillions in bailouts. They bought up failing banks for pennies. J.P. Morgan Chase swallowed Bear Stearns and Washington Mutual. In 2023, they swallowed First Republic Bank. Every single crisis, you lose your house, your 401k tanks, and the mega banks emerge larger, wealthier, and more untouchable. Jamie Dimon, the current CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, is sitting on phone calls with the Treasury Secretary during these crashes, dictating the terms, just like Morgan did in his library. You have three choices right now. Option 1, accept the matrix. Keep your money in the big banks, pay their fees, and let them use your wealth to compound their power. Option 2, fight back quietly. Pay off your debt, use credit unions, buy hard assets like gold, real estate, or Bitcoin, and starve the beast of your capital. Option 3, if you can't beat them, own them. Buy their stock. If the system is rigged, to bail them out and guarantee their profits, become a shareholder of the rigged game. It's cutthroat, but it's the reality Morgan built. J.P. Morgan died in 1913. John D. Rockefeller looked at Morgan's relatively modest personal estate of $80 million and laughed, saying, "And to think, he wasn't even a rich man." But Rockefeller missed the entire point. Morgan didn't care about having the most money in his bank account. He cared about controlling the systems that held everyone else's money. Today, J.P. Morgan Chase controls $3.9 trillion. The top four banks control over $11 trillion. They are the modern emperors. You cannot escape J.P. Morgan's ghost. He is in your wallet. He is in your mortgage. He is in the very inflation that eats your savings. But now you can finally see the system. And seeing it is the only way to survive it. If you want to understand the true forces moving your money, hit that subscribe button right now. Don't let the legacy of 1907 keep you in the dark. Welcome to J.P. Morgan's world. Let's learn how to beat it together.